بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. It is a great blessing of Allah that He has allowed us to come to such a gathering where we remember Allah and we remember His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We ask Allah to bless this gathering. We ask Allah to make us benefit from whatever we learn. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it a means of us getting closer to Him and a means of us getting closer to His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and increasing in love for Him. And we ask Him to make this a means of us being with Him in Jannah. Ameen. Allah has blessed us with innumerable blessings. And blessings, the number of blessings, we can't count how many blessings Allah has given us, our Creator. How many has He blessed us with? He Himself in the Quran says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا. If you were to count the blessings of Allah, His bounties, if you were to count the bounties and blessings of Allah, لَا تُحْصُوهَا, you will not be able to count them. Billions and billions of ni'mats. We are drowning in the ni'mats of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Firstly, we were nothing and He gave us existence. Then He made us human rather than an animal, another blessing. Then He made us healthy without any defects. We are not blind, we are not deaf, we have our senses, another blessing. Then He gave us the greatest blessing that any human being can have, which is the blessing of Iman, through which a person will inshaAllah be saved from Jahannam and enter into Jannah forever and ever. Then He could have made us from any ummah, any nation, but yet He made us from the best of nations, the nation of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Through this link with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so many other blessings we will get. On the Day of Judgment, we know so many blessings. On the Day of Judgment, the previous nations cannot enter Jannah until the nation of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam does not enter Jannah. It is haram upon them. So many ni'mats. I've just mentioned some main ones, but if we were to count, if we were to try to give true thanks upon any of the ni'mats I've mentioned, we will not be able to give true thanks for any of the blessings Allah has given us. Even if we were to be in prostration from the day that we were born till the day that we die, trying to thank Allah for the blessings He's given us, or even to try and thank Allah for one blessing He's given us, we will not be able to fulfill that even if we did that. There is a narration in the famous Al-Mustadrak al-Hakim compilation of hadith by Imam Hakim rahimahullah, where he mentions a remarkable story of a worshipper from a nation of the past. He mentions that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he came out to his Sahaba and he mentioned to them that Jibreel alayhi salam, the mighty angel Jibreel alayhi salam, just came from him now. And Jibreel alayhi salam said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that I swear by that being who has sent you with the truth, there was a worshipper who worshipped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for 500 years on the top of a mountain. This mountain was located on an island. This island was surrounded on all four sides by salty water. At the foot of this mountain was a stream which would give sweet water. And at the foot of this mountain was also a pomegranate tree. And every single day, this pomegranate tree would give one fresh fruit. So this worshipper, every evening, what he would do, he would come down to the foot of the mountain. He would make fresh wudu. He would drink from the sweet water. And he would take this fresh fruit that the tree had given, eat, use it for nourishment, and then he would go back to the top of the mountain. Then, all night and all day, he would worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He would not disobey Allah. He would worship Allah night and day. Like this, many days, weeks, years, decades, and centuries passed. And after 500 odd years of his life, he was coming to the end of his life, and he made a request to Allah, a dua to Allah, that, oh Allah, when I die, please take me in the state of prostration. The best position a person can be in, the closest a person is to Allah is in prostration. So he asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, oh Allah, when I die, take me in the state of prostration. And not only that, when I die, then after I die, keep me preserved in that position, until the day of judgment. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He accepts this dua. And subhanallah, if 500 years of worship wasn't enough, look at the intention and look at the good thoughts and good du'as and his eagerness to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this position. May Allah forgive us for being so slack in our salah and not having this kind of desire and these kind of du'as and these kind of intentions to do so many nawafil. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also give us this kind of jazba, this type of mentality. So anyway, Jibreel alayhi salam mentions to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that his dua was accepted, and every time as angels, when we come down to the earth and when we go up, we pass by this abid who is preserved in this position. And Jibreel alayhi salam says to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that on the day of judgment, this worshipper, this abid, he will be brought in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say to the angels, Adkhilu Abdul Jannah bi rahmati. O angels, enter the slave of mine into paradise through my favor and mercy. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also enable these words. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also enable our ears to hear these words on the day of judgment from our Creator and Master Allah. Ameen. So this abid, when he hears this, he says, Bal bi'amali, rather I want to go in Jannah through my actions. I don't want to go. He didn't say I didn't want to go through your mercy, but that's what he meant. Bal bi'amali. Maybe he thought that he had worshipped Allah for 500 years and he didn't disobey Allah, and then on top of that he was in sujood for so many centuries till the day of judgment. Maybe he thought that he deserved Jannah. So he said, Bal bi'amali, rather I want to go into Jannah through my actions. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say to the angels to enter him into Jannah through my mercy. But he will again insist, Bal bi'amali. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will then tell the angels, if he insists, then let it be. So he will ask the angels to weigh up his 500 years of worship against the blessings that Allah had bestowed him with. So the first blessing that the angels bring to put against the 500 years of worship is the blessing of the eyesight. And the 500 years of worship are completely wiped out by the eyesight that was given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The eyesight had just paid for the 500 years of worship. Now this Abid would have many other ni'mas still to be counted. And so, as we would say in the dunya, that he is now in the negative. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders the angels to take him into the fire of hell. Yeah. Because his good deeds are gone now. Yeah. So he must go in the fire of hell. So as he is being taken towards the fire of hell, this Abid now knows he does not have anything apart from the mercy of Allah. Yeah. So then he starts pleading with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Rabbi bi rahmatika adkhilni al-jannah. Rabbi bi rahmatika adkhilni al-jannah. Oh my Lord, enter me into paradise through your mercy and favor. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will tell the angels to bring this Abid back in front of him. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say to him, Ya abdi man khalaqaka wa lam taku shay'a. That, oh my slave, who created you when you were nothing? And he will turn around, the Abid will say, Anta ya Rabbi. Oh my Lord, it was you. Yeah, you created me. Then Allah will say to him, so was that due to your own doing, or was it due to my mercy? Then he will turn around, the Abid will say, Bal bi rahmatik. Rather, it was through your mercy, Ya Allah. Yeah. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will count the other major favors that was given to him. So who gave you the strength to worship me for 500 years? He will say, Anta ya Rabbi. Yeah. Who gave you a place to stay on the mountain in the middle of an ocean? Yeah. Who took out for you sweet water from salty water? Who took out for you a fresh fruit from such a tree which normally only fruits once a year? Every day you would get a fresh fruit, whereas normally this tree would fruit only once a year. Yeah, who did all this for you? Yeah, who? Yeah. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَسَأَلْتَنِي أَنْ أَقَبِضَكَ سَاجِدًا فَفَعَلْتُ ذَلِكَ بِكَ. And then on top of that, you asked me to take you from this world whilst you were in the state of prostration, and I did that for you as well. Yeah. So who was it that did all this? So the Abid will say, Anta ya Rabb. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say, فَذَلِكَ بِرَحْمَتِي وَبِرَحْمَتِي أُدْخِلُكَ الْجَنَّةِ. That all of this was through my mercy and favor. Yeah, and through my mercy and favor, I will now enter you in Jannah. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will turn around to the angels and say, أَدْخِلُوا عَبْدِ الْجَنَّةِ. That I enter my slave into Jannah. And then he will say to the slave, فَنِعْمَ الْعَبْدُ كُنْتَ يَا عَبْدِي. Oh my slave, you are a very good slave. Then Jibreel alayhi salam, he turns around to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and says, إِنَّمَا الْأَشْيَاءُ بِرَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى يَا Muhammad. That, oh Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, verily all things are dependent on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy. So we can see from this story that without the mercy of Allah, nobody can enter Jannah. And that even it is mentioned regarding the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even he will not enter Jannah through the actions that he did. Rather, it will be the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala which will enter even the best of all of his creations into Jannah. May Allah make us from those who will be with him in Jannah. Ameen. So a person may ask that what is the purpose of doing good actions if it will not earn us Jannah? Well, a scholar mentions that our good deeds are like a bowl that a beggar puts out in front of a rich person, and the bowl, it attracts the mercy. It is a visual cue. It is a cue in order to instigate and in order to create mercy into the heart of the rich person. Yeah. And similarly, a person, when he does so many good deeds, on the day of judgment, we are hoping that with these good deeds, Allah will look at these deeds. Yes, it is not worthy of Jannah. It is not worthy of such a place that no eyes have heard, no eyes have seen, no ears have heard of. Yeah, no mind has imagined. Yeah, the blessings that are in Jannah, we don't deserve it. Yeah. But our actions are like this good. Are like a bowl that is put in front of a rich person. So, inshallah, we hope that Allah will look at our deeds and forgive us, and through His mercy enter us into Jannah. So, just because we can't earn Jannah doesn't mean that we shouldn't try. And it shouldn't mean that we shouldn't give thanks to Allah for the blessings He has given us. The ulama have mentioned that for every single blessing Allah has given us, there are certain things we need to do in order to try to fulfill the right of that blessing. So the first thing we should do is we need to give thanks to Allah for the blessing that He gave us. So how do we do that? Firstly, with the heart. So we need to admit in ourselves that the blessing that Allah gave us was totally due to His favor and mercy. It was not due to our goodness or due to something. We didn't deserve it. Allah gave us this. And then a person, he will, with his tongue, he will acknowledge that, oh Allah, walakal hamd walakal shukr. To you belongs all praise and to you is thanks for this ni'mah that you gave me. And by the way, when a person he does this and he remembers the blessings that Allah has given him, he will start to love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more. It's a very good method to increase our love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because al-insanu abdul ihsan, a human being, he is the slave of favors. Meaning that a person, when he remembers the favors that have been done upon him, then he will love that person more. When a person does a favor on him, then he starts to love that person more. So this is a very good way to grow love of Allah in our hearts. And then thirdly, the blessing Allah gave us, we should use it in the way Allah wants us to use it. Yeah. So with our body parts, yeah, with our actions, we show that the ni'mah was, we show that we are thankful by using it in the way Allah wants us to use it. And this is doing shukr with action. Okay. So a person, he has been given eyesight, for example. He admits in his heart that, oh Allah, you gave me this ni'mah. Yeah, I didn't deserve it. Day and night I have been sinning with these eyes. You could have snatched my eyesight away anytime. But Ya Allah, through your karam, through your lutf, through your mercy, yeah, you continue to give me this ni'mah. And then the person will use his eyesight in the way Allah wants him to use the eyesight. So he will not look at evil, he will not look at the opposite sex who he's not supposed to look at. He will not look at non-mahram, he will not look at films, he will not look at anything evil. Rather, he will look at the Quran, he will look at his parents with muhabba, he will look at the things around him, the creations of Allah, which are all signs that Allah exists. He will look at, ponder over the skies and the greatness of Allah that can be seen in the creations. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also mentions in the Quran that وَفِي الْأَوْدِ آيَاتٌ لِلْمُوقِنِينَ وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ, that in the earth are signs for those who believe, and in yourselves as well. Meaning in yourselves there are signs as well for those who believe. أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ, do you not see? So when we are going through the talk regarding the eye, in a few minutes we will start regarding the eye. I want you to keep this ayah in mind. Yeah, Allama Shawkani rahimahullah in his tafsir Fathul Qadir, he mentions أَفَلَا تَنْظُرُونَ بِعَيْنِ الْبَصِيرَةِ, that do you not look with the eyes of understanding. فَتَسْتَدِلُّونَ بِذَلِكَ, by doing that you will be guided, you will be given proofs على الخالق الرزاق المنفرد بالألوهية, to the fact that there is a singular creator provider who is truly divine. And also as well, Ibn Kathir rahimahullah, he mentions regarding this verse وفي الأود آيات للموقنين, أي فيها من الآيات فيها من الآيات الدالة على عظمة خالقها وقدرته. that by looking at the earth and at yourselves, these are signs which will indicate upon the greatness of its creator and its power. And then he mentions as well that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created many different types of plants and animals. He has created the mountains, He has created the valleys and the lakes and the oceans. Yeah, and He has created different types of people with different tongues and different types of mentalities. Yeah. وما بينهم من التفاوت في العقول والفهوم والحركات. Yeah. والسعادة والشقاوة. And also in regards to the endings, that some will be in good endings, some will be in bad endings. Yeah. That basically, if a person ponders, then it will prove to him that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists. And it also is mentioned here in Tafsir Ibn Kathir as well, that Qatada mentions من تفكر في خلق نفسه عرف أنه إنما خلق ولينت مفاصله للعبادة. That if a person, if he ponders upon the creation of himself, he will recognize that he has been created with flexible joints which have been created so that you can worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So keeping this ayah in mind, when we are discussing the eye and the creation of Allah, how Allah has given us this eye, we can keep this in our mind, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is encouraging us and is telling us in the Quran to ponder, to create, to ponder upon in the earth and also in ourselves, and obviously that includes our eyes. And inshallah this will be a great means of us making our iman strong. Yeah, because this is one of the main reasons of doing such talks, is to revive our iman, to make our iman stronger. Okay. So the eyes, the second most complex organ after the brain. When we see there is much more happening behind the scenes than meets the eye. The eyelids play a crucial role in blinking out any foreign particles like dust in the blink of an eye. Excuse the pun. The front clear surface of the eye is known as the cornea. You can feel its shape by closing your lids and putting your finger on it, and then moving your eyes side to side. That bump that you feel, that's your cornea. There is no blood vessels on the cornea. It receives oxygen directly from the air. The eyelids are one of the fastest muscles in your body. Look at how quickly the dust particle is expelled. On average, we blink 20,000 times a day. So that video came up without me expecting it to come up. I think I pressed the button by mistake. I was going to mention that when we look into the eye, we should ponder also upon the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, more specifically the names of Al-Khaliq, which means that Allah is the creator. And Al-Khaliq means that it's such a creator who creates from nothing. So this name Al-Khaliq is specifically only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He's the only one that can create from nothing. Yeah, ourselves as human beings, we're al-sani', we're sani'. We are just assemblers. Yeah, we are not makers. Yeah, so the true Khaliq is Allah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-bari', the originator. Yeah, He again created from nothing, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He doesn't copy anybody's design. His designs are unique, yeah, and His designs are perfect. And if you were to look at how He has created everything around us, you will come to acknowledge the greatness of Allah, and you will come to acknowledge the miraculous nature of the design and the maintaining of the creations. You will come to the conclusion that Allah exists and that Allah is one. And also as well, keeping in mind the name Al-Musawwir, yeah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the fashioner. Yeah, and how He fashions the different creations. Yeah, especially the human being in 3 layers of darkness. Allah fashions us in the womb from just one cell. Subhanallah. Yeah. So keeping this in mind, I just want to mention regarding some facts of the eye. So the eyes are those organs which allow us to see the world, weighing just under 30 grams and the size of ping pong balls. It is so sensitive that it can see and pick up a match being struck 50 miles away on a moonless night. Its resolution is second to none. 550 megapixels at a rate of 60 frames a second. The 48 megapixel iPhones of today are no comparison whatsoever. They are workhorses, constantly working at 100%. As soon as a person opens his eyes, he wakes up in the morning, instantly it starts to work at 100% capacity. Yeah. They don't need warming up at all, completely like other body parts. Some other body parts need warming up, but the eyes don't need warming up, and they allow us to see 70 million colors. 80% of everything that we learn comes through our eyes. 50% of the brain's energy is used up in processing the information from the eyes. No wonder then that the eye is made up of 2 million working parts. Subhanallah. So these were some facts mentioned regarding the eyes. And the video that we saw, again, massive blessing which was mentioned was the blinking. Yeah, that we, on average, a person blinks 20,000 times a day. Yeah. And the blinking process is a very, very important process. Yeah, because every time a person blinks, a thin layer of tears is coated very uniformly on the cornea, and this thin layer of tears acts like a very smooth surface for the light to bend precisely onto the back of the eye. Yeah. Without this surface being smooth and without this tear layer, the vision would be blurry. And that's why we find many people who don't have enough tears in their eyes, or the tears are not of good quality and the tears dry up quickly. We find that they get blurry vision because this tear layer becomes disrupted. Yeah. So it is very important. It's a very important process, the blinking. Yeah, in terms of lubricating, in terms of protecting. Yeah, and also if something goes in the eye, a person blinks, it gets expelled out of the eye. So a person, imagine he had to thank Allah 20,000 times a day by saying Subhanallah or Alhamdulillah every time that he blinked his eyes. Yeah. And a person, he blinks very quickly. Yeah. It is mentioned that a person can blink up to 4 or 5 times in a second. Yeah. Again, this is a great blessing of Allah. Imagine if it took a person 3 or 4 seconds to blink. Yeah. He would be driving his car and then he would blink, and 3 seconds later the car in front of him has gone into the front of his car. Yeah. He would be walking and it would take him a few seconds to blink and he would fall down because he didn't see the ditch in front of him. So it is a great blessing of Allah that we don't even notice that we blink. That's how quick it is. That's why in most languages it is mentioned regarding something that happens quickly that it happened in the blink of an eye. And even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions in the Quran, وَمَا أَمْرُنَا إِلَّا وَاحِدًا, that our command is but one. Our command is but one. كَلَمْحٍ بِالْبَصَرِ, like the blinking of the eye. Yeah. So even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator of the eye and the creator of these muscles, has made a comparison of His command, which is just a comparison. It's not the same speed, because Allah's command there is no speed, it's instant. But in order to make us understand, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has compared His command and how quickly it happens to the blinking of an eye, to the quickness of the blink, as quick as it takes a person to blink. Yeah. So we should thank Allah for the fact that we blink and the fact that we blink so quick. We'll go from the front of the eye towards the back, and we'll mention the function of some structures, and at the same time we may mention some other points as well. So the cornea is the first part I want to mention. Yeah, it's a very remarkable structure. It is a clear window at the front of the eye, the dome-shaped window which allows light in. That's the cornea. You can see that in the picture. To be honest, you can only see the cornea because of the reflection. It is so clear, the only way that you can see it in that picture is through the reflection. Now, as you saw in the video, there's two reasons for that. Well, in the video only one reason is mentioned. And so what are these two reasons? Firstly, the cornea, even though it's made up of the same material as our skin, because it has no blood vessels in the cornea, this is one of the reasons why it's clear. Because if you had blood vessels, it would obviously be opaque. It wouldn't let any light through. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed the cornea to be nourished via oxygen, which is attained through the air directly. So oxygen, it goes into the tears and then it goes into the cornea, and that's how the cornea is nourished with oxygen. Yeah. And also as well, this cornea, it has 5 layers. Yeah, this cornea is a piece of skin, the dome shape, which is only 0.5 millimeters in thickness, the thickness of a credit card, but it has 5 layers. And the 5 layers, as you can see in this picture, the middle layer is called the stroma, and because the stroma has an orderly arrangement of the collagen fibers, yeah, the spacing is so orderly that this is what gives the cornea its clarity. Okay, and every single structure here, by the way, has a very important role. We don't have too much time to elaborate on each one, yeah, but I'll just mention briefly the 2 other structures that are quite important. One is the endothelium, which is a single celled layer which faces the inside of the eye. And inside of the eye, as you can see on the left hand side of the square, there is a chamber, a gap between the iris and the cornea, the back of the cornea, which is filled with aqueous humor, which is filled with some fluid. Now this fluid, it's going inside the cornea constantly, and it is the job of the endothelium to pump out the water back into the chamber, because if the water builds up and is not pumped out, then the cornea will become cloudy and it will not function anymore. So it's a very important layer, the endothelium. And the front of the eye, the part that touches the eyelids or the air, is the epithelial layer, which is, as you can see, it's got 3 layers there, but the epithelium is important because it protects the eye. If a person scratches his eye, normally it's the epithelial layer which is the part which it gets scratched first, and the epithelial layer is such that it renews itself every 5 to 7 days. So if a person does scratch his eye, then his eye heals very, very quickly. Yeah. And we see that in the surgery, in the clinic, many a time a person will scratch his eye, the epithelial layer will be scratched 95% of the time, unless it's a deep cut, but most scratches are just superficial and the epithelial layer gets scratched. You would normally find that the eye within 24 to 48 hours is completely healed, and the reason for that is because this epithelial layer, it has a very high turnaround in terms of new cells. Okay, so you might think that the lens, which is the part that sits behind the cornea, which sits behind the iris, sorry, you might think that the lens is the most responsible for focusing the light onto the back of the eye. However, this would be less than half correct. Why? Because if we look closer, and if we look at how the eye is focusing the light onto the back of the eye, we will find that the cornea, because of its curvature and because of its refractive index, it is actually much more responsible than the lens in terms of focusing the light. Okay, in fact, it's gives 2/3 of the bending power. So let's look and see how our eyes focus an object. So light comes from the sun 93 million miles away, traveling as photons or as waves at the speed of 300 million meters a second. The wavelengths, the waves of light hit an object, hit the apple. Some are absorbed by the apple itself, and some of the light rebounds and reflects back off the apple. And this is what gives an object its color. The light that it reflects back off, this would determine the color of the object. So in the case of the apple, the light is being reflected off the apple and it hits the eye, the front of the eye. Okay, an object, when it's far away, then it comes into the eye, the light comes into the eye more or less in a straight fashion, in a linear fashion, and it hits the tears first. And like I mentioned to you before, the tears create a smooth surface for focusing. And because of the curvature, the convex shape of the cornea, and because the cornea is a slightly different refractive index, it's a slightly different material, and therefore light bends differently in the cornea than it does in normal air. So for example, a person, when he looks into a shallow pond, the water, it appears actually shallower than it is. And the reason why is because the light is traveling and is bending in the water differently. Yeah. So light, when it travels in air, we would say that the air is a refractive index of 1.0 and water is about 1.35. So it bends a slightly more, light bends a bit more in water because of the dense nature of the water in terms of the particles. So same with the cornea, it's slightly denser and the refractive index is actually quite similar to water, it's 1.35. So it bends and it goes through the pupil, and then the lens, because of its curvature and because of its different refractive index, the light then bends again and it focuses onto the back of the eye in a area known as the fovea, which is responsible for our central vision, and it's an area which is packed full of cone cells, which I will mention in a bit more detail in the next few slides. And you can see from the diagram that the apple is upside down, and it is the job of the brain to put the image back into the right direction. It is the job of the brain to process all the information that is given by the eyes and to put things into perspective. Because one is the eye giving the information and the other is the brain processing your hearing, your balance, your speaking, your movements, and coordinating that with the vision. And even with the vision, the brain, it first works out the lines and the outline of objects, then it fills in the colors, and then the depth perception, and then I'm simplifying this process, but I'm just mentioning the basics, and then the image comes into our consciousness somewhere in the brain, which is yet to be discovered. So the brain is a separate topic. We're just sticking today with the eyes, which is the second most complex structure. But the brain and how it does its job and how it processes the vision, this is a completely different topic, and it's much more complex than even the eye. Okay, so we won't touch on that. So as I mentioned before, that the cornea, it is giving a power of 40 diopters, and the lens is giving a power of 20 diopters. And as you can see, that the eye requires 60 diopters of power to focus light onto the back of the eye. Okay, so that might seem like a lot of power for somebody who wears glasses and may be aware that somebody may have a prescription of -2 diopters or +10 diopters. Yeah, so to have a prescription of +60 diopters, it's quite a lot of focusing power that's needed. Yeah, and obviously it's because the eye is so short. The focal length is 22 to 25 millimeters. So in order to bend the light into focus onto the fovea, it would require quite a lot of power. And as you can see, the cornea is responsible for that. In terms of the majority of the focusing power comes from the cornea, and that's why when a person has laser eye surgery, and this is the part of the eye which is modified and it's reshaped. Yeah. Okay. Let's now watch the next video, which will give us a little bit more insight into how the eye processes the information. The iris. This is the coloured part, the coloured ring that sits behind the cornea. The hole in the middle, which is black, is called the pupil. The iris regulates the amount of light coming into the eyes. If it's too bright, or when focusing, it becomes smaller and therefore protects the eye from brightness. And when it's dark, the eyes need more light, it becomes dilated and bigger. Behind the iris is the lens. The lens can become more fatter or convex to help focus the light when reading. The lens stops working properly for most people after the age of 40, and therefore they will need glasses for reading. Light from a faraway object comes into the cornea, bends a little bit, and then bends a little bit more through the lens and focuses itself exactly on the retina, the light sensitive part of the eye. This scene shows how things are blurry far away for some people who are myopic or nearsighted. The light is being focused not on the retina, but a little before the retina. This can be because the eye is too long. The next picture shows a hyperopic eye, where things close by are blurrier than things far away. The focus point is behind the eye. The eyeball is a bit too short, nothing that a pair of glasses can't fix. So the iris of each and every single person is unique in colour and in structure, and that's why sometimes some companies now they use iris recognition in the biometrics, and with some people they do have problems with their iris as well. Bits of the iris can be missing, iris coloboma, and then this causes problems with brightness. Person might require sunglasses to be worn all the time just so that the eyes are protected from the sunlight. So it is a very important structure in our eyes. Now, if we continue talking about the bit that was mentioned in the video regarding the short-sightedness. So myopia is, as was mentioned in the video, when things are blurry far away because the image gets focused in front of the back of the eye. And 1 in 3 people in the UK are myopic, so it's quite a large number. And this number is increasing. The statistics are showing that by 2050, the level of myopia will be 50% of the population. So what's fueling this? Environmental factors mostly. So studies are showing that people
are spending far too much time indoors looking at things close up, and their eyes are not getting a chance to look at things far away. The eyes are not relaxing, and that's why, and the eyes are not getting enough sunlight, so that's why myopia is on the increase. So I do advise most of my patients, especially the patients who are under the age of 20, their eyes are still growing. Your eyes grow mostly from when you're born to age 3 or 4. That's where the biggest spurt of growth happens. From 17 millimeters, the focal length of the eye is 17 millimeters when you're born, and then it increases to close to adult levels at the age of 3 or 4, and then it continues to grow up to the age of 20. So I do advise that group of patients, especially, that they try to go outdoors every day, and they try to take regular breaks from their screens and from their laptops, especially, etc. And hopefully that will help with the with myopia not developing, or with myopia not increasing as fast. So myopia is because either the eye is too long, as you can see on the diagram on the right hand side, or because of the curvature of the front of the eye, the cornea. If it's too curved, then this also causes the light to become focused in front of the retina. Okay, and that's why when a person has laser eye surgery, it's the cornea that the surgeon, or it's the cornea that is flattened by the surgery, in order to bring the focus point back onto the retina. And for most people, as I said, as the eye grows from when you're born to the age 3 or 4, the focus point remains on the retina, because an amazing process occurs. As the eye grows, the front of the eye, the cornea, the lens, the power of the cornea and the power of the lens, it flattens and it reduces slightly to counterbalance the eye growing, in a process known as emmetropization. Amazing process, and it's very, very, very minute changes in the dimensions of the cornea, in the curvature of the cornea, which allow this to occur. And because of that process, things stay focused. And it's when something goes wrong with that process, that's when a person ends up myopic. So let's look at what kind of values of change cause blurry vision. So a person, if his eye was longer than it should be by just 1 millimeter, then a person will have a prescription of -3 diopters, which is not a big prescription, but it is quite blurry. So you can see from the right hand side picture that a person on the test chart in the optician's test room normally sees something like that with a -3. So it is quite blurry, okay? And so that shows you that the eyes have been created very precisely, and throughout our lives that precision remains, and it is only the Almighty Allah, who's the best of creators, فَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ أَحْسَنُ الْخَالِقِينَ, that all blessings are from Him, from Allah, is the best of the creators, the best of the designers, that He creates in perfection, and then He maintains that perfection for us. So those people that have glasses, they should thank. Those people that don't wear glasses should be thankful to Allah that He's allowed them to see without glasses, and He hasn't made their vision blurry. And those people that do wear glasses, they should also thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because as you can see from this next slide, 18% of the world who are blind because they don't have glasses. So it's something that could be very easily reversible. And also, together with that figure on the right hand side, 39% of the world who are blind because of cataract. Again, another reversible condition which can be solved with a small minor operation. So let's talk about cataract. So cataract is when the lens of the eye clouds and becomes more opaque, and this happens as a person gets older. So when you're born, the lens is completely clear in both of your eyes, but as a person gets older, normally it becomes cloudy, and if it becomes too cloudy, then an operation is required. So 1 in 3 people in the UK will normally require a cataract operation, and normally if a person smokes as well, you're twice as likely. A smoker is double at risk of getting a cataract, and also diabetes is also a risk factor. So 1 in 3 people who are diabetic will require a cataract at some point. So it's the surgery itself is the most cost-effective surgery procedure in terms of quality of life restored on the NHS, because it's a quick operation, it's simple, and it's very successful. Yeah. No stitches are required. A person can walk in with very, very poor vision and can walk out from surgery being completely back to normal again. So it is something that's a benefit to us in the developed world, that we have this option of, if somebody develops a cataract, they can get it done very quickly, very easily. But those in the developed world, like I said, the 38% was it, the figure, who are blind and who are blind because they can't have this operation done. So there are many companies, many charities that organize these cataract operations. I would highly recommend that we donate some money and we get involved in these activities, in these operations that would give back the poor people, give them back their sight. So the operation is where a probe is inserted into the eye, and only a incision of 2 millimeters is made, and the cataract lens is emulsified, and then the contents are aspirated from the eye, vacuum from the eye, and then a artificial lens is inserted through a tube, and the lens is folded so it fits into a small hole, and the artificial lens is put inside the eye, and it opens up and gives the person clear vision again. Let's just watch the next video. We're going to talk about the back of the eye.
Symptoms including double vision and headaches. The two eyes working together is what gives us our depth perception. Our eyes move thanks to 6 muscles in each eye. Problems with these muscles can give rise to many symptoms including double vision and headaches. The two eyes working together is what gives us our depth perception. When the image is focused on your retina, the light photons trigger off nerve impulses that travel via the optic nerve to the brain for processing. The retina is full of photoreceptors that are sensitive to different wavelengths of light. Our eyes can see up to 7 million colours due to the photoreceptor cells known as the cone cells. The cone cells are of 3 types: red, green and blue. Most of these cone cells are packed together in an area of the eye known as the fovea. This is what gives us sharp, detailed central vision. The rod cells are responsible for vision in dim light and are mainly found in the peripheral retina. Detail is not needed in our side vision as much as the center, so rod cells will suffice there. The information travels via the optic nerve to the brain, where it is processed at the back of the brain. Eventually, a completed image reaches consciousness somewhere in the brain, which is yet to be identified.
So you can see from the next diagram that there's a cable, an optic nerve, which takes all the messages from the eye to the brain, and it is the back of the brain, the occipital lobe, in which the information is processed. And like I also mentioned, 80% of what we learn, it comes through our eyes. So it is important that we do control our eyesight. So whatever we look at, will have an impact directly on our heart. Yeah. Whatever we see, whatever we hear, whatever we use our senses for, they affect our heart, and then it is our heart which becomes affected and which allows us to do good or bad actions. Yeah. Comes in a hadith, inna fil jasadi mudghah إذا صلحت صلح الجسد كله وإذا فسدت فسد الجسد كله ألا وهي القلب. That in the body there is a piece of flesh. If it is good and it is healthy, then the whole body is healthy. And if it is corrupted, then the whole body is corrupted. So because our eyes are a massive gateway to our hearts, it is important that we look at those things what Allah wants us to look at, and we also avoid the things Allah wants us to look at. And also, I forgot to mention when I was mentioning the tears, that tears are not only good for our eyes physically, but they are also good for our akhirah. A person who cries in the fear of Allah, it is mentioned in the hadith that a person who cries in the fear of Allah, then he will be saved from the, will not enter hell until milk goes back into the udder. So we should invoke ourselves to cry, soften our hearts, especially when making dua. It is mentioned about Thabit al-Banani, rahmatullah alayhi, a famous tabi, that he used to cry so much, and in the daytime he used to fast, and in the night time he used to pray tahajjud all night. When he became old, his eyesight was about to go blind, and he went to the doctor. The doctor said, I have a solution, you need to stop crying. And then he turns round to the doctor and says, فَمَا خَيْرُهُمَا إِن لَمْ تَبْكِيَا, that what good are these two, meaning the two eyes, if they don't cry? Yeah. So it is for a Muslim that he should cry in the fear of Allah, that he should have a soft heart, and he should cry when he asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So carrying on with the next slide, this is what an optician sees when he looks into the eyes through the pupil. So that's the side view, that's the front view. This is a view of the back of the eye. The retina is visible together with the blood vessels. So it is the only place in the body where blood vessels can be seen without cutting your skin. So it's a very good indication of a person's general health of his blood vessels. It's a very good indication of how the blood vessels are in the rest of the body. Yeah. So these diseases like diabetes, like blood pressure, yeah, these things will show up in the eyes. And also the retina, which is the thin layer covering the back of the eye, 0.5 millimeters in thickness, is also the only part of the central nervous system that can be viewed from the exterior. So any disease that affects the brain, any diffuse disease that affects the brain, will show up and can show up in the eyes. Yeah, so things like multiple sclerosis usually show up in the eye. Yeah, the optic nerve becomes swollen. So having your eyes tested and having the back of the eyes seen to is quite important in terms of preserving not only your eyes but also the general health of a person. Okay, so the back of the eyes contain 125 million photoreceptors. Photo meaning light, receptors meaning sensors. So 125 million photoreceptors in a space that's as big as a large stamp. So the full retina from one side to the other is 33 millimeters. So, and the cone cells, as was mentioned in the video, are responsible for our color vision. There's 9 million of them, and they're mostly located in the fovea. There's an area which is responsible for our central vision. As you can see, an area equivalent to 1.2 millimeters in diameter, and that's where most of the cone cells are packed. And these 125 million photoreceptors, the information from them goes down nerves and goes out through the optic disc towards the brain. So how many axons or nerves or wires, if you want to call them, are inside the optic nerve? You can see that it's mentioned 1 million axons are in this cable. So an area, the width of the disc is just 1.75 millimeters. Yeah, the thickness of a thick credit card. So it's an amazing feat of engineering from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's fitting 1 million wires into such a small area, and that's why if a person does get damaged to the optic nerve, if any of these nerves get damaged, there's no way of reattaching these axons, because they're so minute and so small and so sensitive that once damaged, there's no way of reconnecting them. And I personally think, even in the future, yes, we've had heart transplant, a person can even have a corneal transplant, but there will never be a time in history, according to my limited knowledge, that a person will be able to have a full eye transplant, in which if somebody's eye was completely detached, the optic nerve was cut off, where he or she could get his eyes reattached again. I don't think that's going to be possible. Yeah. However, there is a person in history that has had his optic nerve reattached. I'll give you a few seconds to think about who that might be. I'll come back to you guys for an answer for that in a minute. In the meantime, we'll just look at the next slide. There's 125 million receptors, but the optic nerve only has 1 million axons. So that's telling you that some data compression is happening, and that there is some processing of the data on the retina itself, because there's only 1 million axons and there's 125 million receptors. So again, we don't have time to go into how all that works, but it's quite complicated and very again, another proof that the person who designed this, yeah, is divine, must be a higher being. Yeah, this cannot happen through something, as they say, evolution or a natural selection process. So coming back to my question, well, I'll give you one more slide there. You can see the million nerve fibers there in the diagram. That's a side view of the optic disc. Okay, and the optic disc is also an area where the only area in the back of the eye that doesn't have any photoreceptors. So there's actually a blind spot in our vision. In everyone's vision, there's a small area which is blind. However, our brains, when they process the information from our eyes, they actually cover up that defect, so we don't notice the blind spot. Again, an amazing blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imagine a person has a screen at work he uses every day, and there's a large area of pixels missing on his screen. How much that would bug him. Yeah. Or imagine when you were driving and the blind spot wasn't covered up, our brains weren't able to cover the blind spot, then it would cause a problem when driving as well. And also what happens is one eye, the visual field of one eye overlaps the visual field of the other eye, and that also helps to cover the blind spot. So you can see from the next diagram that there is a blind spot where there's no photoreceptors, and you can see as well where the fovea is where the highest number of cone cells are. So coming back to the original question, who is the only person to have had a successful eye reconnection or transplant? Have anybody got an answer? Okay, so I've given you a clue there. Mount Uhud. So in the Battle of Uhud, a Sahaba by the name of Qatada bin Nu'man Ansari radiallahu anhu, his eye was hit by an arrow, and the eyeball fell out from its socket and onto the cheek of this Sahaba. And he came, and the optic nerve must have been detached, and the muscles of the eyes as well, the 6 muscles would have been detached at this point. For it to come out onto your cheek, there would have been a full detachment. So he comes to the Prophet ﷺ, and the Messenger of Allah, with his blessed hands, he puts the eye back into the socket, and a reconnection takes place through the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that it was mentioned فَكَانَتْ أَحْسَنَ عَيْنَيْهِ وَأَحَدَّهُمَا, that later on this eye that was reinserted by the Prophet ﷺ, it became the better of the two eyes, and also was the one that was the sharpest. Okay, that was just a side point. Okay, so in the UK, when I see people in my practice, these are the things that normally cause problems in vision, blindness. So in the UK, 50% of blindness occurs because of macular degeneration, 18% glaucoma, and 17% diabetic retinopathy. So the diabetic retinopathy, actually, in my practice, it's a little bit more than that 17%, because, as I mentioned before, that somebody who has a South Asian background is much more likely to be diabetic, 6 times more likely in fact. So I'll mention that when I go over diabetes in a couple of slides, but we'll just go we'll go over glaucoma first. So glaucoma is a disease which affects 1 in 40 over the age of 40. It's where the optic nerve, which takes all the messages from the eye to the brain, is where the optic nerve gets damaged. Okay, there's 2 types, open angle and closed angle. I'm going to mention just the open angle, the most common type, which is where the optic nerve gets damaged very, very slowly over a long period of time, usually because of high pressure in the eye, which builds up, and then the high pressure compresses these nerves, strangles these nerves, and the nerves die slowly. And the pressure is such for most people that it's not discernible by the patient. So this damage is happening very slowly without a person realizing. So it's a silent blinder, basically. So a person that's over the age of 40 is much more likely to get this condition. It's very rare under the age of 40 for somebody to have open angle glaucoma. So the optician will normally recommend anybody over the age of 40 to have this check done, where we check the pressure in the eye. If the pressure is high, we can refer a patient to the hospital, and they can get drops that will reduce that and stop any more damage happening. Okay. Also, as well, there's other tests that the optician does, like a visual fields test, which checks for side vision damage. And also, when the optician looks into the back of the eye, he can see the optic nerve. So you can see here in the diagram, the optic nerve on the right hand side, there's a lot of nerves missing. So the optician would recognize that that's an eye that has got glaucoma, and the one on the left side is a healthy eye. The optic nerve looks healthy. So the next slide is going to show you what a person that has glaucoma, what they see. So they have something called tunnel vision, and the side vision, it deteriorates very slowly. Okay, and by the way, there's a strong family history link as well. So if a person does have an immediate member of family that has glaucoma, they should get their eyes tested. And also, people with an Afro-Caribbean background are 4 times more likely to get glaucoma than somebody else. Okay. Next one, diabetic retinopathy. Okay, so retinopathy is where damage happens to the retina, and in this case, due to diabetes. So diabetes affects 5 million people in the UK. 1 in 16 people have diabetes, and as I said before, 6 times more likely for a person who's of South Asian origin to get diabetes. So the high sugar levels inside the body, inside the blood vessels, they damage small blood vessels, especially the ones in the eyes. Okay, and the blood vessels, they start leaking blood and other fluids. The retina swells up, and it can result in cloudy vision and can even result in blindness. Like I said, Maybe I mentioned that statistic or not, but it's diabetic retinopathy is the leading cause of blindness in the Western world in the middle-aged group. Okay, so if a person is diabetic, then they need to take this seriously. They need to get their eyes checked regularly, and they also need to control their diabetes. So one of the reasons that's been given for South Asians having a high percentage of diabetes is because of their diets, their lifestyle. The lifestyle is where the diet includes a lot of sugar. So a person can control diabetes in most cases, especially when the cause is due to food intake. So if a person does want to preserve his eyes, very important that he or she controls their diet. The next disease that we see in the practice that causes blindness, well, the leading cause of blindness is called macular degeneration. There's two types, one called dry, which is the most common type, and one is wet. So I'll just explain what dry macular degeneration is. So the macula is the area which is responsible for our central vision, which I showed you on one of the previous slides. So over here you can see the yellow dots called drusen on the macular area. So as a person ages, usually the macular region becomes thinner and tiny clumps of protein, drusen, appear, and this makes a person get this causes reduced vision, especially in the central area. Okay. As I mentioned before, the macula, the retina is very active. The metabolism is very high. The eyes are constantly working. So as a person gets older, the waste substances that are produced at a microscopic level, at a cellular level, for some reason, the efficiency is reduced, and a person gets this macular degeneration. Okay, 5% over the age of 65 get this condition. And unfortunately, there's no cure for it. As we speak, there's no cure for this condition. So if a person does start having damage to their vision done through this condition, then there's nothing that can be done. So how do we prevent this from happening? There are certain things that are risk factors. So for example, smoking. If you smoke, you're four times more likely to get this. Okay, and also a person, he should have green foods in his diet. So things, fruits, vegetables, spinach, kale, which have green color in them, because the things that have green color normally have an ingredient called lutein in them, which has been linked to reducing macular degeneration. And as I said to you, there's another type called wet macular degeneration. So this is where blood vessels grow behind the macula and they start leaking, and they can damage vision rapidly. So the dry type happens over many years, happens very slowly, progressively, and then that can convert sometimes in a few cases to wet, where a blood vessel appears behind the macula, starts leaking, and the vision can overnight literally become reduced. So if a person does have dry macular degeneration and he or she does see blurriness in their vision, straight lines appearing bent, then he or she needs to go immediately to the optician or to the hospital to get it checked out. Because for the wet type, there are treatments available which would stop further damage occurring. Okay, so coming towards the end of our talk now, that's a scene of what a person with macular degeneration sees. So you can see the central vision is blurry. It's not a nice condition. And just before I finish my talk, I just wanted to mention certain things that we can do to preserve our eyesight. So why would a person want to preserve their eyesight? Obviously, for obvious reasons. A person uses their eyes for good, and a person came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, who is the best of people? He ﷺ said, Man tala umruhu wa hasuna amaluhu, that the one who had a long life and he did good actions in that life. So he had a long life, وَحَسُنَ عَمَلُهُ, and his actions were also good. So a person can only have a long life if he looks after himself, if he has good health, if he has good eyesight. And he can only do good deeds if he has good health. As we know, when a person becomes ill and doesn't have good health, even if he wants to do good action, it's difficult for him to do it. So we need to preserve our bodies. It's an amanah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's a ni'mah from Allah. So our deen gives us two things in order to preserve our bodies and our eyes. That is dua and dawa. Dua and dawa. Dua, to ask Allah, to beseech Allah. Why? Because He is musabbibul asbab. He is the one who, at the end of the day, is the one who makes the final decision regarding all matters. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our du'as that, oh Allah, preserve my eyes, preserve my body, give me a strong body and keep it in afiyah until the day I die. Yeah, there's du'as of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he has taught us, many du'as. And if we were to use the du'as of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then there will be more effect in that. So one of the du'as that a person can read, it's a long du'a, but a person reads after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to read this du'a at the end of gatherings. So I'm not going to mention the full du'a, but I'm going to mention the part which mentions the eyes. So in that dua there's a part that says, Allahumma matti'na bi asma'ina wa absarina wa quwwatina ma ahyaytana. That Allah grant us benefit from our hearing, from our eyes and our power up until, as long as you keep me alive, as long as you keep us alive. So we should use the du'as of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They are very powerful, and he sallallahu alaihi wasallam, many different times of the day, he sallallahu alaihi wasallam has taught us to pray such and such du'as. They are there, they will give us barakah in our actions, in our body parts. Okay, and together with du'a we make dawa. Yeah, Allah has made this world darul asbab. Yeah, we have to use the means. Yeah, and after we've used the means, then we make dua. So what are the means? Just in summary, a couple of points. One, regular eye tests are important, especially if you're over the age of 40, especially if you've got a family history of diabetes, or you're diabetic, or you've got a family history of glaucoma. Regular eye tests, as we've seen, will pick up many problems at an early stage. Even for kids as well that are under the age of 7, to have regular eye tests will pick up things like lazy eyes, will pick things up like myopia up quickly, rather than the teacher picking it up at a later date and they've already run behind the school. So a person should take advantage of that. Number 2, smoking is a major cause and a risk factor in many of the conditions mentioned. Yeah, so a person needs to stop smoking. He can seek help from his doctor. He can seek help through other channels as well. It may require counselling, but if a person is really adamant and really motivated that he wants to look after himself, he wants to protect his eyes, then if he smokes or he or she smokes, then they definitely need to cut smoking out. Number 3 is to eat a healthy diet. Yeah, especially things that include vitamin A, vitamin C, E, zinc, copper, and lutein. Yeah, so as I mentioned before, these things can be very helpful in preventing macular degeneration. And there are eye vitamins that you can buy as well that include these ingredients. So if you have got history, if you have started to get macular degeneration, or you've got a family history of it, and you're not eating in your diet, then you can buy these tablets. Speak to your optician and they can advise you. Just to finish my talk off, we've seen how the eye works, and we've seen that anybody with even a minute amount of real sense would conclude that the eyes are no less than a miracle. Yeah, and that the designer and creator must be the one true God. Yeah, even Charles Darwin, the founder of the theory of evolution, he mentions in some of his writings, I'm just going to quote what he says regarding the eyes. He says, to suppose that the eye, with all its inimitable contrivances, for adjusting the focus at different distances and for the correction of spherical and chromatic aberration could have been formed by natural selection seems, I freely confess, absurd in the highest possible degree. I repeat the last bit he said, I freely confess it is absurd in the highest possible degree. So even people like Charles Darwin recognize that the eye could not have been formed by natural selection. But then later on in his writings he mentions that we need to believe that it occurs because, like I said, these people have an ulterior motive. They want to take Allah out of the equation. They want to take out accountability out of the equation. Okay? And also in our Islamic teachings, we understand that blindness of the eyes is a loss of a massive blessing and ni'mah. However, the real loss and the real blindness is a person who is blind to the truth. And therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in different places of the Quran regarding this as well. He mentions in one place, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أفلم يسيروا في الأرض فتكون لهم قلوب يعقلون بها أو آذان يسمعون بها فإنها لا تعمى الأبصار ولكن تعمى القلوب التي في الصدور. That do they not travel in the earth so that they have hearts to understand with or ears to hear with? Meaning the people, if they were to travel in the earth, the Quraysh, if they were to travel in the earth, they would see this. They would see by looking at what happened to the previous nations. They would see by looking at the earth and the signs around them that there's a greater being at work here. And then Allah mentions, فَإِنَّهَا لَا تَعْمَى الْأَبْصَارِ. So it is not the eyes that are blind, rather blind are the hearts which are in the chest. Yeah, meaning the heart is blind from the truth. So Allah is saying as well here that true blindness is blindness of the heart. And that's why in Tafsir al-Qurtubi, Mujahid rahmatullahi alayhi, he says, لِكُلِّ إِنسَانٍ أَرْبَعُ أَعْيُنٍ. That every human being has 4 eyes. Yeah, he's not talking about glasses here. He's talking about something else which he's going to explain now. عَيْنَانِ فِي رَأْسِهِ لِدُنْيَاهُ وَعَيْنَانِ فِي قَلْبِهِ لِآخِرَتِهِ. That he has 2 eyes in his head for the dunya and he has 2 eyes in his heart for the akhirah. فَإِنْ عَمِيَتْ عَيْنَا رَأْسِهِ وَأَبْصَرَتْ عَيْنَا قَلْبِهِ فَلَمْ يَضُرَّهُ عَمَاهُ شَيْئًا. That if a person is blind, his eyes are blind, the eyes in his head are blind, but the eyes of his heart are seeing, then the blindness of the dunya, the blindness of his physical eyes, فَلَمْ يَضُرَّهُ عَمَاهُ شَيْئًا. His blindness will not cause him any damage whatsoever. In the hereafter, like Abdullah ibn Maktoum radiallahu anhu, a blind sahabi, he was blind in the dunya, but he has the highest levels of paradise in Jannah. It will not damage him, it will not affect him in any way. And وَإِنْ أَبْصَرَتْ عَيْنَا رَأْسِهِ وَعَمِيَتْ عَيْنَا قَلْبِهِ فَلَمْ يَنْفَعْهُ نَظَرُهُ شَيْئًا. And if his eyes of the dunya are sighted, he can see with his eyes of the dunya, but blind is the eyes of the heart, then this seeing of the eyes of the dunya, فَلَمْ يَنْفَعْهُ نَظَرُهُ شَيْئًا, then his seeing will not be of any benefit to him at all. In the akhirah, if he did not believe and see the truth with his heart, with the eyes of the heart, then he will be flung in the fire of hell. May Allah save us from being blind of the heart. Until may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala take us with iman. I'll end my talk here. Wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.